Hey everyone, and welcome back. This is OmniMan86, and today we are taking a look at the massive pile of books that I read in March of 2023. This isn't even everything. Let's get to it. So to kick things off, we are going to start with the books that I read from independent publishers, creator-owned works here. And so we're going to start with this book by Boom Studios, which is The Many Deaths of Laila Starr. This book is written by Ram V and is drawn by Felipe Andrade. Spoiler alert, I'm going to crush and just destroy a lot of these names. So yeah, just get used to that. So this book, you can see, kind of comes in a unique size, kind of a deluxe edition, but a little bit of a different, ratio than what you see a lot of deluxe editions comes in. But it's got a nice, hardcover here, which I'm a sucker for all things hardcover. But it's a great story about this woman, Laila Starr, and quite literally, they're not burying the lead here, her many deaths. And so it follows her through her deaths, her reincarnations, her relationships that she develops along the way with different characters. And the artwork, I was not familiar with this artist, but there's a lot of really great art happening in this book. You can kind of see some of this. I'll flip through. You can see a few things here. There's a lot of really unique stuff. And I felt like the art really fit the tone of the book very, very well. And it's divided up in these chapters, so it's nice and easy to read. So you can get through this, pretty well. But this was really, really great, and so I enjoyed that a lot. Next, we're going to take a look at Blacksad. Blacksad is a book written by Juan Diaz Canales and art by Juanjo Garnido. Again, I'm just doing so great on these names. This was a series of books that comes out, and I had never read any of these before. They are published or actually created by these two Spanish gentlemen, but predominantly for French audiences. So this has been translated over the years. The three stories that are collected in here were published in, I think, like 2000, 2002, and 2005, kind of around that time frame. And then this collection here, which collects all three of these, this came out in 2010. So you can see here in the States, we've had to wait a little while. Dark Horse is the publisher that takes care of these books. But this came as a recommendation, and I read this entire thing in one sitting. It's, it's not super huge, but there's just so much great stuff in here. So the artwork fits so well. Some stuff happening on that page. We're going to skip that one. But you can see the tones and the colors. This is 100% a noir detective story. So Blacksad is this detective. Everything is these anthropomorphic characters. Everyone's an animal. And it follows Blacksad as he goes throughout his career as a private investigator, a detective. And, it feels like you're just reading one of those old kind of black and white detective noir movies. And it holds up so well. It's so good. There are more after this that I'll probably be reading very soon and reviewing in coming months. But this is a really great read here. And then next up, a book that a lot of people might be familiar with, and that is The Incal by Alejandro Jodorowsky and art by Mobius. So this is the deluxe edition. This came out pretty recently. It's a very, very large, collection here with the hardback. And so you've got kind of the artwork here on the side. And this is not the book itself. This is what contains the book. So we're just going to pop off this here. And I don't mean for this to be like a whole review of this, but it's packaged so well. I'm a sucker for this stuff that I love to open it up and look at it. And then you've got this nice hardcover here with kind of this almost fabric-y material on the front, a nice ribbon. See nice lettering here on the side, and it's just presented so well. There's also some artwork inside that we're not going to talk about right now, but this story, it's a whole universe created by these two gentlemen, And if you're familiar with Mobius, his artwork will not look unfamiliar to you if you've ever read like his Silver Surfer with Stan Lee. And so there's just so much great stuff in here. And this just opens up a whole universe, the Incal universe. And there are so many stories that exist and take place after this. And it was a really great read. I had been thinking about reading this for a while, finally got around to it, decided I wanted to kind of jump in with this type of a presentation. I was able to get a pretty good deal on it because this thing does retail for about $150 from Humanoids. So, you do spend a little bit more, but again, the presentation is great. And there are so many stories that come after this and spin out that you can find in a lot of different formats. But it very much reminded me of things like Dune, those kind of crazy sci-fi empire universes, very well thought out. Dune and Blade Runner, there are influences in here. So I think all of those books and stories probably drew a lot of inspiration from this because they all kind of play really well together in that genre. So if you're interested in that kind of futuristic sci-fi stuff, this is a great place to go to. Next, we have my one DC book that I read this month, and that is the latest printing, or the latest kind of restock of Absolute All-Star Superman. This is by Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely, considered by many people to be one of, if not the best Superman stories ever published. Kind of give you a look at the container here, the nice box that it comes in. We've got this artwork here by Frank Quitely. And I've had this book before, but I've not had it in the Absolute format, so I wanted to be able to grab it and take a look at it. I love this image here. If you have not seen or follow it online, James Gunn, who's going to be writing and directing the next Superman movie, has been pulling inspiration from this. He's shown some pictures of reading this, and it's because a lot of people really, really enjoy this. And it's one of the best Superman stories out there based on a lot of people. And so you can see a lot of that great artwork here. And so this Absolute Edition does have a dust jacket. You can see it here. And so if you pull it off, you can see what's underneath. I love this image of Superman sitting on this cloud, kind of looking over Metropolis. It was definitely a great image that's been reproduced in a couple of different ways. But this is a 12-issue series. It deals with Superman presumably coming up on the end of his life. No spoilers if you've not read this, but that's kind of the premise. Lots of different feats that he does. It's got kind of his cast. It's got Lex Luthor. It's got Lois Lane. It's got his parents. It's got Jimmy Olsen. Everybody that you would want in kind of a Superman book. You can see through here. So I've read this before, so it wasn't a surprise, but it's been probably a couple years since I've read this, so I thought it was a great time to revisit it and get it in this format. I will say I really like it. It's not bad. I enjoy it very much. I don't necessarily give it the praise that some people do. I think the writing is really, really great. I think Grant Morrison does a great job of capturing who Superman is, and there's some really great moments in here. If you're familiar with the page where Superman is keeping the young woman from committing suicide, it's one of those things that sticks with me and always jumps out at me, but it's only from one single page in this entire book. But it is so powerful. Frank Quitely's artwork, I can take it or leave it sometimes. There are some panels and some pages where I'm like, this looks so great. And there are other ones that I don't particularly care for. Again, this is all my preference. If you like it, that's completely up to you because it is subjective. I'm not a fan of short cape Superman. He is drawn with a short cape in this. I do like a longer cape. It seems kind of weird with how short it is. And some of the ways he draws Clark Kent are not my favorite, but you can't really argue. I mean, you could if you wanted to, but Frank Quitely's obviously made a career kind of drawing in his style and having his own voice, and it is unapologetic Frank Quitely artwork in here. So if you are a fan of that, then it's a great place to jump into. And it is a seminal Superman mini-series, maxi-series, however you want to look at it. So it is definitely worth a read. If you've never read it before and you're a Superman fan, check it out because it'll. I feel certain you'll very much enjoy it. Next up, we have our first Marvel Omni, and that is Silver Surfer by Dan Slott, Michael Allred, and Laura Allred. In case you're not familiar, Dan Slott is the writer, and then Mike and Laura Allred are a husband-wife creative team that does the artwork. And so if you've ever seen some modern comics, you've probably seen this art style around before. They've done some other books, and they have a very very recognizable style, and it works really well for this book. If you don't know anything about Silver Surfer, it's okay. I don't know hardly anything about him other than that he exists as a herald for Galactus, or has at least in the past, and they touch on that history a little bit in this book. But you don't really need to know a whole lot about it. You kind of you can kind of pick up everything you need to know as you go throughout the read, because it very much centers around his relationship with this Earth woman that you see on the front of the book here, which is Dawn Greenwood. And it's kind of interesting because you've got this story about this very cosmic Marvel superhero. And the question is, why is he connected to this person? Why is she involved in his life at all when he exists out in the cosmos? And so it's a really great story that kind of touches on that and the adventures they go on together. There's not a ton of tie-in to like the larger overall Marvel universe, so it's very self-contained. You can read just this. It doesn't really, spill over into other omnis or storylines or anything. So you can read just this. So Dan Slott wrote kind of two series of Silver Surfer. That's hard to say, and they're both collected here. So it's the entire run. I had never read anything about Silver Surfer before from the Dan Slott run, but I heard nothing but great things about it, and so I wanted to check it out. And it was definitely worth it. If you've not picked it up yet, this was a reprint that just came out recently. I think you can still probably find some copies out there, but I imagine it will go pretty quickly. So if you've not picked it up yet, I would jump on it and grab a copy. All right, coming up next was the biggest read through that I did for the month. I ended up with COVID partway through the month, and so I had a lot of free time. And so I spent basically a week just laying in bed, reading all kinds of stuff. And so this was my opportunity to jump into Brian Michael Bendis's run on New Avengers and what he kind of kicked off here. And so I don't have absolutely everything collected between the beginning and end of his run, but I can kind of walk you through a little bit about what's going on. So first off, we have the New Avengers Omnibus Volume 1. This has been out of print for a while. It has been near the top of some reprint polls, and so hopefully this will get reprinted. I actually voted for this in the latest near mint condition reprint poll. Obviously, I've already got the copy, but reprinting volume 1 would be great for everybody who hasn't had a chance to get this yet. But then also I would love to get volume 2, and I feel like they will have to reprint this first before volume 2 comes out. So in order to help speed that along, I said, let me vote for volume 1 to get this back into print. This is a used copy I bought. It's in decent shape. I think I'll probably keep it. I don't think I'll upgrade or switch it out when a new one comes out. But this is the beginning of Brian Michael Bendis's run on Avengers. And so there's a lot of content in here, but you're going to see pretty much everything written by Brian Michael Bendis and artwork by a bunch of different people, including David Finch, Steve McNiven, Frank Cho, Mike Deodato, Lionel Francis Yu, Olivier Coipel, Alex Maleev, Howard Chaykin, Pascal Ferry, Jim Chung, Mark Silvestri, tons of people. You can see all the names they have right here, and these are all just the main artists that are on the different books that are in here. And so it contains a good bit of stuff, and so we have the main story here. It actually starts out with kind of the end of the Avengers before the New Avengers kicks off, and so this includes the kind of small event, which is Avengers Disassembled, which kicks off everything that's happening in here, and also ties in very heavily to the House of M. So House of M, the main story in here, affects what happens in here, but this story is not a part of it. There is a part where it kind of recaps what has happened. So if you've never read House of M, it kind of gives you a full recap of what happens in this event. This was a recent print. This is the first time this event has been printed in an omnibus format. You can find it in trade paperback as well, and I'm sure there's old hardcovers you can get. So I ended up, reading a little bit of this, jumping over to this and reading it, and then jumping back into New Avengers. So these events definitely tie in very heavily to one another, but it's really great to see a lot of these characters. I was able to learn a lot more about some of these characters I didn't know as much about. You can see here the lineup for New Avengers. We have Captain America, we have Tony Stark Iron Man, we have Spider-Man Peter Parker. You can see we've got a couple other folks kind of lurking in the background here. We have Jessica Drew, Spider-Woman. We have Luke Cage back here. Let's see. We've got a couple characters over here on the side. Is that Wolverine? It is Wolverine. We've got Wolverine, and I can't tell. I think maybe that's supposed to be I actually can't tell who that's supposed to be in the background there. But this gives you an idea about some of the characters that are involved in here. And so this is going to kind of kick things off for you and get things going with the Brian Michael Bendis era of New Avengers. And then you have House of M. I think this is the standard edition cover. It comes in a couple of different ways here. But I kind of like these covers where it has like this big piece of artwork here in the middle that kind of stretches out. But House of M, there's a lot of stuff in here. You've got stuff written by Brian Michael Bendis, Mark Waid, Fabian Nicieza, John Layman, Reggie Hudlin, Chris Claremont, Daniel Way, Greg Pak, Ed Brubaker, Peter David, Fred Van Lindsay, and actually some more people. And then you've got art by Olivier Coipel, Salvador Larroca, Tom Grummett, Scott Eaton, Alan Davis, Chris Bocciolo, and even more in here as well. But the main series is written by Bendis and done by Coipel, so that's why you see them getting top billing. And this is a huge event. If you don't know what happens at this event, I'm not really going to do spoilers, but I definitely encourage you to go read it. It affects the entire Marvel Universe, the X-Men, the Avengers. If you've been reading Avengers up to this point, or if you've been reading X-Men up to this point, they both kind of converge in what is happening here. And it is important to read the beginning of New Avengers here, because the issues that are in here for Avengers Disassembled absolutely set up what happens here. And so they play off of one another. And so you kind of need both to go together. So again, really good reads. I really enjoyed reading a lot of Bendis's run and what he was doing throughout Avengers here. He had a really great run, and this era, there's so many great things that have happened. And so this first omnibus here, which there is no volume 2, it's never been printed. They only printed volume 1, and it's been out of print for years. But this book gets you up into Civil War, which we're going to talk about next. So during this era, there were so many large, bombastic Marvel events that really changed their entire universe without rebooting, without doing anything like that, but really things that had real consequences and played out for years. We just got done talking about House of M, and then next we have Civil War. So unlike the other two books that we were talking about, this is not written by Brian Michael Bendis. This is written by Mark Millar and drawn by Steve McNiven. And if you've never read this event, if you've seen the MCU movie Civil War, you kind of have some kind of an idea, even though there's a lot of differences in the details with this. But essentially, it is a superhero Civil War. And about any character you can think of gets factored in some way in this. This is just the deluxe edition hardcover. There is no omnibus of this. I don't even know. I've never mapped it out as far as how many issues would end up being, because it pretty much affected the entire line of Marvel books out at the time. So it would be quite a lot. And it, just like the movie, this features Iron Man versus Captain America. They are, disagreeing about some stuff, and they literally launch a civil war in here. And so, again, just like the MCU, there's a lot of things that happen in here that kind of spin out, and this affects a lot of the lines moving forward. And so as you move out of this book, this kind of coincides with the very end of the first omnibus for Brian Michael Bendis in New Avengers, and there's a lot of things that kind of change up after that. So if you're looking to go to a couple of different places, you can get the Brian Michael Bendis deluxe editions, if you can find those. There are 7 of them. The first omnibus, I believe, kind of takes you through the first 3. So if you're looking to kind of pick up after that, you can go on to 4, 5, 6, and 7, because there's a lot of stuff that kind of happens through here as a spin out of Civil War and kind of the distrust that the public then has about superheroes. So next, we move into what is kind of known as the Dark Reign era of Marvel Comics. Dark Reign wasn't really an event in and of itself. It was really kind of, I believe, like a year-long initiative that all the books played into. So there's not a Dark Reign mini-series or anything like that. But as you moved into that, there were a lot of different things that happened. Again, I'm not going to try and talk about spoilers, but you ended up with a few different teams of Avengers. You had Mighty Avengers, which you see here. There's a few different collected editions of this. This is Dark Reign. You can see here it's kind of wraps up that event, or that kind of timeline. We have New Avengers, which is still going on. This is hardcover volume 7. This is the last of those, so the end of Brian Michael Bendis' New Avengers run. More to come on what happens after that. And then all leading up to Seige, which was this kind of mini series that ended the Dark Reign segment of well, it really kind of pushed things along in Dark Reign. And so these three end up kind of weaving in between each other. So as I was reading through these, I was jumping back and forth between Mighty Avengers, New Avengers, and Siege, because you get to a point where a lot of these things are interweaving with each other. So Mighty Avengers, this is written by Dan Slott and Christos Gage, and it features a team of superheroes, some of them you might not necessarily expect. But in here, you have Hank Pym leading a team of Avengers, which includes U.S. Agent. If you've seen The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, you're familiar with him. We had Hercules. We had Scarlet Witch. We had Jocasta. We had Stature. We had Vision. We had, look at that Hulk there. Wonder who that is. So lots of different things going on here, and then you can see there's a bunch of different artists involved with this as well. Not necessarily a consistent series artist on that. Then we had the end of the New Avengers run by Brian Michael Bendis, and so there's a lot of different things going on there. You see some of the same artists, but really Brian Hitch is one of the big ones on there, and so it begins kind of the collaboration with Brian Michael Bendis there. And then Siege, which is a mini-series, and so this kind of contains everything you need to read for the Siege event. Obviously not the things leading up to it, but for the actual event itself. So it has like Siege 1 through 4, and then the New Avengers and Dark Avengers issues. So there is a little bit of double dipping between these two. But this event here kind of rounds out a lot of what's going on. So again, just really kind of pushes this era forward with what else been going on in the Marvel Universe. And there were just so many things that I forget were happening during this time with all these different Avengers groups. And why are there so many different Avengers groups? And what are they doing? And are they affiliated with one another? And so that kind of continues to progress until you get to Siege here. I would say one character I got to learn a lot more about in this is Sentry. If you've not read anything with Sentry before, he plays pretty prominently in this book, and so you'll get to learn a little bit more about him. But you can see there's a couple of Asgardians on here with Captain America. Asgard begins to play very heavily into this, and so you've got a lot happening in here, which is ultimately going to lead you to the next event. So after you wrap up with Siege, then the next place is actually not this book, but is Secret Invasion by Brian Michael Bendis. Again, another big event with huge ramifications. I had read it recently, so I did not read it in this read through, but if you wanted to kind of keep going event to event, Secret Invasion would be the next one. Then after you finish with that, you notice this is not an event book. This is a Thor book. This is Matt Fraction's Thor run, and I did not read this entire thing, but the reason this is out is because there is an event in here that I did read, and that is Fear Itself. So Fear Itself is the next Marvel event, which ties in very heavily with these two characters you see right here. We have Thor, Odin's son, and his father, Odin. And what's happening with Asgard, why are the people where they are, what is happening, why are these two really kind of fighting, so it really kind of spills out into that next event. And so there's a lot of big action pieces in here, very heavily dealing with Asgard. So if you're a big fan of Thor, this is a great place to kind of jump in and read for the next event before we keep going on in the universe. All right, before we get to this next event, we're actually going to talk about this little mini-series first, which kind of kicks things off. So this is Avengers X-Sanction. You can see the character Cable here along with the Avengers, and it looks like maybe he shot some of them. Who knows what's going on here? But this is a 4-issue miniseries. You can see this is a very small collected edition here. It's very skinny. You can probably still find this out there in the wild, even though it's technically been out of print. You can kind of still find it hanging out. But this is kind of like a key up for Avengers versus X-Men that we're getting ready to take a look at. It's not necessarily required reading, but if you've got the copy, why not? It's only 4 issues, and it kind of kicks off the road to Avengers versus X-Men. Again, another huge event. This time actually written by Brian Michael Bendis, but then also a lot of other people as well. I had forgotten kind of coming into this that so many people were involved in this event, that not just one person wrote it. And so we have, in the main series, we have Brian Michael Bendis, Jeff Loeb, Jason Aaron, Ed Brubaker, Jonathan Hickman, Matt Fraction, Mark Waid, Kieran Gillen, Catherine Immonen, Dan Slott, and Rick Remender. So lots of different hands in the pot in this one. Lots of art in here. Great people like Ed McGuinness, Frank Cho, John Romita Jr., Olivier Coipel, Adam Kubert, Stuart Eminem, Steve McNiven, Terry and Rachel Dodson, and a lot more. There's a lot packed in here. This is a thick omnibus. I think this is now the omnibus with the highest number of page count. I think that's officially the count on this one. So you've got this large event. This is a fairly recent event. I actually don't know if this is still in print or not, if you can get it. But some people feel very strong about this, don't care for it. I still think it's a good event. It really kind of carries forward all the momentum that we've had over the last years in Marvel Comics, from House of M all the way to here. There's a lot that's been happening, and everything really kind of comes to a head with the Avengers fighting the X-Men here. And it's really interesting because you have characters like Wolverine, who obviously has been an X-Men for most of his history, but also he's been an Avenger. And so where does he land on this? You have characters like Scarlet Witch, who also in the same place, who features very prominently in here. And, that's a character that ties a lot of these events together, which is Wanda. There's a lot going on with Wanda through all of this. And so if you're a Scarlet Witch fan, it's kind of worth it to get into a lot of this. But I really enjoy this. You've obviously got a lot of tie-ins. As with all of these Omnis, not all of the tie-ins are super great. Not all of them are worth it. And then you can decide whether or not you like to read these things front to back, or if you like to jump around and read them in order. With these, I went through and I read them all in order, so I had lists, and so I was jumping around a lot with bookmarks and things like that to figure out what was the correct reading order. It gets a little messy, so it's not always necessarily intended to be read that way, but you've got some choices here. But again, a huge event, lots of ramifications coming out of this. Again, if you're an Avengers fan, if you're an X-Men fan, then everything kind of comes together here in this big event, and then has huge repercussions for everything moving forward. All right, last but not least, we are down to our last two books that I read for the month of March. So after the events of Avengers vs. X-Men, there's kind of two different paths you can take, and this is one of them. This is Uncanny Avengers Omnibus. This is written by Rick Remender and Jerry Duggan, who does most of the work in this. And actually, I think Jerry Duggan maybe only wrote one or two issues in here, so it's basically Rick Remender. John Cassidy and Olivia Coipel do a lot of the artwork inside of here along some other artists. And so this really spins out of the end of Avengers vs. X-Men. You don't have to kind of come read this. It is a great book, but this is basically what happens after the end of it. And Captain America says, hey, I would like to have a team with Avengers and X-Men together. And so that's why you see this team that Cap has put together, although maybe he's not the leader of it, despite what this image may let you believe. And so you have characters like Cap, you have Wanda, you have Havoc, you have Thor, and you have, you have Rogue. So man, I just completely forgot her name for a second there. There are also some other characters as well, but these five here are really kind of the main cast throughout here, and so you've got a lot going on. Let's flip it around here. You can also see another picture down here on the spine of the book, and that's what happens when you try and do too many things at one time. You start knocking books over. But you can see you have Rogue and Scarlet Witch here, which obviously play in very closely together throughout the book here. And so it's good. This is one of those things, again, like I said, there's a couple of different ways you can kind of read coming out of Avengers X-Men, and this is one of the team books that kind of comes out of that. But the first part of this is going to lead all the way up to the next book, which is Marvel's Age of Ultron. This is the last Bendis event, and we've got Brian Michael Bendis with Brian Hitch here. And this is, a story, again, some people didn't like it, some people did. It really just depends on whether you're a fan of things like time travel and what that looks like. And I will say I was surprised there's not as much Ultron in here as what the title would suggest. So I think that's why some people didn't really care for it, is that it builds Ultron up to be the main villain. He's kind of the catalyst for this event, but he doesn't really stay prominent throughout the entire event. And so I get why some people did not care for that. But, if you like Bendis, if you like Marvel events, then it's still a good read. You can probably still find some of these hardbacks out there in some of your local shops. But this is just kind of a maxi series. There are a few tie-ins that are factored in with this, and so you get most of the tie-ins from like the other series and things like that come into play for the Age of Ultron. But that kind of brings us to the end of what I read for the month of March, and I've got a couple things planned for coming for April and May. There's some reprints, there's some new prints coming out that I think are going to be really exciting to read through, and so I'm very excited. But let me know, what did you read in the month of March, and then what do you have coming up? What are some things you want to read through, and maybe what are some Marvel or DC books that you would like to see featured next?